Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 39 of GT Masters, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of GT class, some fictional and some real race cars. And in this particular pick, I must say this is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most severely underappreciated cars of Gran Turismo 6. And not necessarily just Gran Turismo 6, because this is a car which is a lot better than people give it credit for, and it's actually a lot more useful than most people realise. Now, you'd be forgiven for assuming that this car isn't that great in the broad scheme of things. It doesn't look like it would be a particularly amazing car. It's not a bad looking car by any means, but it doesn't look like it's going to really give any of the big dogs anything to worry about. It doesn't have a particularly high price, the spec isn't particularly high even when tuned, so it's just kind of an underwhelming car, at least on paper. And the car in question is the Honda S2000 LM race car. This has been featured on Gran Turismo for a little while now. It's a Polyphony Digital original, which means, for those who are unfamiliar with that, it's not a real race car, it's a fictional vehicle, and it's a pretty good looking car. I mean, it's based on the S2000, so it's not going to look bad, but it's relatively understated as far as race cars go. It doesn't have an insanely large body kit and wing. It does have the body kit and wing, but they didn't go over the top with it, which they could have very easily done. And in some ways, the semi-understated nature of the design of the car actually kind of reminds me of a car which used to be on Gran Turismo, also a fictional vehicle, back on Gran Turismo 2, which I really wish was still on the game, and that car was the Honda S2000 GT1. Now, we do of course still have the Amuse GT1, which is a great car and has a lot of fans, but that's a tuner car, not a race car. Back on Gran Turismo 2, there was a completely fictional S2000 based race car, which was a hardtop version. It had a fixed hardtop, like some of the Spoon S2000 race cars do in real life, and it was an extreme high performance model, almost like a homologation type car, essentially a race car without the livery. That was only featured on GT2 though, it's never been featured since, and since we had this car instead. Now, this car, as I said, has a spec which certainly isn't bad, but it just doesn't particularly shout out at you as being amazing. As far as the engine, it's powered by, unsurprisingly, a 2-litre VTEC engine. It revs up to around 12,000 RPM, so it's a screamer. And as you'd probably expect from an S2000, and from a Honda in general, it's lightweight. It only weighs 1,050 kilos. Now, as far as horsepower, fully tuned, this car puts out 551, which is not bad, but as I said earlier, it's not really going to worry any of the big dogs from Nissan, Audi, BMW, etc. And as far as torque, being a VTEC, unsurprisingly, it's not particularly high, 269 foot-pounds to be exact. As far as the PP is actually very good, 565, so it's certainly not too high for this car. If it were, then this car would instantly become very hindered by that, because to some degree it suffers from the exact issue which you'd expect it to, lack of top-end performance. And to some degree that is there. I'm not going to lie and say that this is some incredible top-end racer, it's just not. But what this car is good at is handling, and more specifically cornering speed. You can take corners on multiple tracks in this car at speeds which can actually genuinely rival some of the best GT cars in the game. Now, compound on top of that the fact that this only costs 125 grand, and you've potentially got yourself kind of a race car equivalent of a sleeper, because it's a car which nobody really views as a threat, and if you take it out in a lobby, most people probably won't even notice. Now, it puts out 525 horsepower per tonne, which doesn't sound that amazing, but given the low power, it's not bad at all. And as far as straight line performance, although it's not as quick as some others, It's not slow, it can do over 180 depending on downforce settings, etc. So good enough for most tracks at its PP level. And if you reduce other race cars down to match this one, it would have a good chance against them. But the great thing about it is, as I said, that cornering speed. This car has to be experienced, to be honest, in that regard. Now, I'm not saying it's the best handling thing ever made, or best handling car in the game, or anything silly like that, but it's definitely a car which I would recommend giving a try, because for the price, it's a fantastic weapon to have in your garage for the kind of time when you might need it. For say 500, 525 or even 550 pp racing, this car is a genuinely effective vehicle, especially on circuits where the big, bad, powerful race cars are kind of irrelevant, because if you have all that power on a track where you just can't use it, it kind of renders it useless, whereas this car has enough power to get the job done and focuses instead on low weight, low body roll, low centre of gravity and tons of cornering speed. So for tracks where that comes in handy, such as city circuits, the twistier variation of Willow Springs, and various other tracks like that, say Apricot Hill as well, tracks where the other cars never really get to use that high-end speed and it's more about your average speed through the corners rather than pure top speed, and you'd actually be surprised at the kind of opposition that this car can actually beat. So for 125 grand, which also makes it one of the cheapest race cars in the game, I would definitely recommend checking out the S2000 LM, because it's a car which is very easy to underestimate, but could come in handy. So, overall, I'd definitely recommend checking it out, and that's it for this episode, so I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.